dinner.
I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask everybody if you could join me for the pledge.
If you didn't come to that, you wouldn't have to come till Monday morning.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. We're in a new location, a little different location this morning here, and thank you to everyone from the Great River Arts for allowing us to be here. First item of business, I would look for an approval of the county board minutes.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Ms. Tabitha, is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Next item of business is the National Adoption Month proclamation.
Good morning, you two.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioner. So I'll turn it over to Melanie first, then second.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board.
Good morning, Melanie.
The National Adoption Month proclamation for November 2018. Whereas there are nearly 2,000 Minnesota children in need of permanent and loving homes that are under the guardianship of the state of Minnesota, 7 of these children that need permanency by adoption are Morrison County children. And whereas all of these children have special needs because of physical, mental, or emotional disabilities, because they must be placed as a sibling group, or because they are school-aged. And whereas these children need extra patience, support to help them overcome previous hardships, children benefit from the connections to their family and their community supports. And whereas children that age out of foster care are more likely to become homeless, incarcerated, or need the support of welfare benefits. Whereas in 2018, there will be 23 Morrison County children with special needs adopted by families. These families are able and willing to adopt children who have special needs, willing to attend special services and training in order to meet the needs of these children. And whereas children waiting for adoptive parents, as well as children and families who have completed adoptions, require and deserve community and public agency support. And now, therefore, be it resolved that November is hereby declared Adoption Awareness Month in Morrison County.
I look for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second. Discussion.
I just want to thank these parents that take in these children and stuff, and it takes a gift to be able to take care of all this. Thank them.
Yes, it surely does.
Yes.
I would say a very extreme full-time job that's over and above virtually anything for anyone to take in a child, very often of no relation, that you're now and physically adopting. I think it's just absolutely marvelous. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Melanie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Is it
you.
okay if we do her adoption report before we maybe take a picture with the
Yep.
proclamation to put in the record?
Or-
So,
Absolutely.
because it is adoption month, we thought it might be good for the commissioners in the community just to see what we have been doing as an agency around adoption. So Melanie put together a report for the board.
Okay, just to clarify, a state ward adoption, those are children that are in our adoption system here at Morrison County because they were in a previous child protection case. So this does not include any information about private adoptions or voluntary adoptions that are done, that don't involve child protection services. So all of these kids come out of child protection situations. As you can see, the increase from 2014 has been dramatic, and we've talked about that in other reports with regard to placement and the current change with the screening criteria, but more importantly, the drug abuse and chemical dependency situation we've got going on in Morrison County. So we've drastically increased the amount and caseload of our state wards. I appreciate that the county board has worked with our office to allow me to change around some services, so, and Brad as well, so, and our amazing staff, so that we can accommodate more caseloads in adoption. So I've had to expand that caseload and the number, I have 2 workers working on that at this time. And because of those shifts, we've been, from 2016, been able to complete a number of adoptions, as you can see. So we have been able to get through those situations much quicker because we have enough staff time devoted to that. The next slide, I just wanted to review the permanency plans. That those are those kids that have been in a state ward, and what their adoption or permanency situation is. As you can see, we've greatly increased the amount of relative adoption in Morrison County over this past year. And that is a fantastic trend, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that's so important a little bit later. We do consistently have kids over the past 2 years, those 7 kids that are either aging out of foster care or remaining in foster care without adoption. The next slide refers to the kids in 2018 that were or are state wards. And one of the things I'm just starting to do is to track their time in child protection cases before we get to permanency, before we get to termination of parental rights. State law says that we need to be at permanency, making a permanency decision for kids by month 12. So kids should reside in foster care for 1 year and no more than that until we have a permanency plan. And
Melanie, are all kids that are in foster care considered state wards?
no, state wards are children that come out of a child protection case, so they were in placement in a child protection case, and then we terminate their parental rights, and then they become a state ward.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So this slide is looking at those state wards and the time they spent in foster care as a child protection case prior to getting to permanency, and how long that took. So for 10 kids, it took 10 to 15 months to get that permanency decision. And for 3 kids, it took over 2 years. And we had 13 kids, the most kids, in 7 to 9 months. So that's the good news. We have at least the most kids, we're at least 50% are meeting it, a little bit more than not meeting it. So that's the good news.
And I was just gonna say that the state and federal government measures us on this particular time period. And so we actually did have to do a corrective action plan because we had kids in care too long prior to the permanency determination. So Melanie's been working with our court system, the judges, county attorney's office, guardian ad litems on trying to improve that because we know the longer kids are in care, the more trauma they experience. So we're continuing to work on that.
And Mr. Chair, Melanie, it's, you have 7 to 9 months and 10 to 15 months in these time periods, but the amount of interaction that your staff has with these families is pretty extensive, is it not?
It's very extensive. We have to see every child in foster care every month, whether they're a state ward or a child protection case. If they're in the time that these 10 to 15 months that they're an open child protection case, that's usually many, like 4 to 5 contacts per month, because you're contacting each parent. Sometimes a family group has multiple fathers. You're seeing contact with relatives, trying to engage relatives, as well as their current foster home. And so, yes, they are very intense cases. And then as well, we've been trying to connect these kids with children's mental health services, so sometimes they also have a children's mental health worker during that time as well.
And I think it highlights, we've talked a lot about this being a very substantially growing area, not only because of some of the law changes, but with the impact that families are seeing due to different drug-related issues, different, other issues throughout the county. But it's just such a time-consuming, important, but time-consuming effort when it comes to staffing and supporting those staff positions with that.
Absolutely, and it's really challenging time right now, because as we understand more about addiction, we understand that relapse is a part of addiction, and we want to be compassionate to parents that are struggling with addiction. And so we're balancing that with the fact that kids can only remain in foster care so long. And at some point, there has to be a permanency decision. So I know it's a struggle to recover, but it's not okay for your kid to linger in care and be harmed mentally and emotionally for an extended period of time while you recover. And so we're trying to engage parents. We're really working hard on that, trying to engage parents into making a permanency plan with us. And that's why that engaging a relative is so darn important, because like if grandma or aunt takes your child, then at some point, if you are able to recover, you can have a connection. But we've, have to continue to do a lot of work in order to have those conversations, and that is a lot of staff time and resources for sure.
And that's some of the challenge with the court system making permanency decisions is the recovery process for our parents is that they will go 4 or 5 months using, get into treatment, and it's like, let's move forward. Then they relapse, and now you're back to a year. And so the court struggles with making those decisions with parents who are chemically dependent. It is a struggle. It's a very huge decision to terminate a parent's rights.
This slide just does reflect in 2018, SED is seriously emotionally disturbed, so that is a high degree of mental illness, or mental illness symptoms present for the child. And so the majority of our kids in this slide are not SED, and that is because we have a large number of small children, babies, infants coming into the system immediately. We have kids that being born to parents who were previously terminated, and so we are getting involved in having those kids go into adoption right away. So that's part of what is kind of signified by this.
We're just over the high side, or the medium side, if you will. We're pretty doggone close to half and half where kids are emotionally
Yes.
stuck.
Yes. And this next slide will start to show kind of a trend as to when we have more of those kids that are, the next 2 slides will show a trend as to when we have kids that are more seriously emotionally disturbed. So these are the kids that continue as of today from those state wards to be in placement and to be state wards available for adoption from that first slide. So we have one child that is in care that had a previous child protection case of 0 to 6 months, 4 to 10 to 15 months, and those 2 kids still that are 24 months and over. That's how long their child protection case stayed open. And these are kids that are available for adoption right now. So we know that kids that linger in care longer have more special needs. All of these kids basically are seriously emotionally disturbed. And on the next slide, it shows where those kids are living right now. 5 of those kids are in a residential treatment facility or in a CADI foster home, and CADI is waiver level care. That is considered nursing home level of care. So those are kids that are very seriously disturbed. They are needing a great deal of support. 2 of those kids did age out independent living. 1 is in relative foster care and 1 is in non-relative foster care. So those are our 7 kids available right now. And I just wanted to chat a little bit about that program improvement plan that Brad had mentioned. There's really 2 major areas of focus on that plan. 1 is increasing our relative search. We know, and we've been tracking and doing our data kind of projects, and we know that when kids are with relatives, their outcomes improve and there's less trauma. We appreciate the adjustments that the county board has supported us to make staff time adjustments. We're still not getting as much as we need because we've had this big influx of state wards. So we're hoping that with the adoptions completing, we'll have some more time to devote to that. The other is focusing on that timeliness to permanency. And that is why we're in that program improvement plan. Working with our CGI team, our Children's Justice Initiative team, which involves county attorney, parent attorneys, our judge, and other community partners and guardian ad litem, school districts even on that system to try to determine what we need to do to make it to permanency in those 12 months. Additionally, I do have great concern, and I've been working with Brad on this. It's going to be a big problem for us to tackle in 2019, and that is our kids with serious mental health needs, most of which are state wards. Residential facilities are scheduled to be 100% county costs coming in 2019. MA coverage will be done for that. I've been trying to write a variance for a local caddy home that we have a home, but I can only do that one per child per time. And so that is nearly impossible to do the way the state rules are set up. And we just do not have enough specific community services at this time in order to serve these kids in their community. We used to use behavior analysts as a part of the CADDY program, and now all of that time, that behavioral analyst program has been shifted to sex offenders relocating. I am struggling to get, I think, the legislature and the state to pay attention to children's mental health. Brad has heard me say this many times, so have my staff. So I'm really hoping to do some work in the next year to try to figure out what we need to do to serve these kids and keep them in our community. Because when they are close to us and their family, they do better. And so we need to figure that out.
If I may, Mr. Chair, question, when a child is adopted, let's say I adopt them, a relative or whatever, and I adopt, these children are, high needs, as you say. Mm-hmm. They come from the state of the ward. Who has to provide the hospitalization and all that for that child? Because if I'm adopting, I'm assuming I'm taking all responsibilities, or is the state or the county make sure that they keep getting the correct treatment and they handle that?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. North Star Care is a part of the benefit system available for these kids. So we pay foster care to foster parents. When kids with special needs are adopted, you get a benefit set that is assigned according to the special needs of the child that go directly to the parent. So there's financial support for some of those severely emotionally disturbed kids, in addition to medical assistance eligibility stays continuously. So medical assistance covers that. Now, what happens if they need residential care and medical assistance isn't going to cover that? That's going to go back to the county at this point. There hasn't been another solution for that. So.
And it's great because of the fact that these kids still get the needs that they help, even though the parent is adopting
Yes.
them, that they just don't throw them to the,
And I think more importantly, that our agency will continue to work with that adoptive family even after the adoption, if they want the support for case management.
Sure.
Or we will refer, if they don't live in our county, we'll refer them to that county, because these parents do need support. So we want to encourage support, provide any resources, even prior to placement if we can, and try to maintain that relationship and maintain those kids in the home. So
It's one of the things I appreciate about our staff. Our staff is, I just commend them. They do such good work, and they work together so well as a team. So the children's mental health workers and the state ward adoption workers work so well together in teaming these cases. And so the families that do adopt get a lot of support, and that ongoing children's mental health worker will stay connected with those families past adoption, like Brad said, if they're in our county, or we refer to the county that they live in. And so we a lot of times talk with them and say, we're not going to leave you stranded. We're going to do all that we can do to support you through this.
Mr. Chair.
Yes?
Melanie, on one of the previous slides there, you had 32 children to date in 2018 that were either in placement or in process or had been placed. And we talk a lot about out-of-home placements. That is not the total number of out-of-home placements that go through social services in Morrison County, correct?
Right, we're at about 100 kids right now in out-of-home placement, which is the highest that's ever been since I've been here. I've been here a while, unfortunately. Fortunately. I meant unfortunately as I'm getting old. But so we're at about 100 kids in total. And so 30 of those kids were state wards. So during the year of 2018, they may have been in child protection and then they were a state ward. So 32 of our 100 kids are state wards.
So in follow to that, so the other 68 kids that were part of the out-of-home placement, are that, so where do they fall then?
Probably about 10 are children's mental health. No, less than that, because I forgot those are state, a lot of those are state wards. Probably 2 to 3 are children's mental health, the rest are all child protection.
And so workers are working with them still with the court process, trying to reunify. They've not reached that point where we have to terminate parental rights.
Yep,
So they're still in the home, so they're not part of the out-of-home placement.
no, they are in out-of-home placement, in relative or foster care.
Okay,
Those 60-some kids are in placement because of child protection reasons of their parents not being able to take care of them safely.
but so those 67, they're just not wards of the state at that
Right.
point. That's where
Yep.
that's where the break is.
Yep,
And
yep.
so then your office and your agency is handling that child protective services to provide for those kids, and they are not in that process, in the adoption process or foster care
Right, their
process.
parents' rights have not been terminated yet, so we're concurrently working with the parents to reunify them with their parents while making another permanency backup plan.
So where are these kids?
So they are in our homes locally in relative care. I think right now we're at about 40% are in relative foster homes. And then the rest would be in non-relative foster homes. And I'm just, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, so I'm just trying to think about our
She's got a great memory
caseload.
So,
for her age.
so they are either with an extended family member, or they are with another individual or another family that says, we will
That
step
are
up.
licensed.
Yep, that we will step up and help provide for this child, because they are not wards of the state.
Right. Right now, we have about, I think it's around 60 licensed, or in the process of being licensed foster homes in Morrison County. And so some of those are being licensed because they have taken their relative in to provide foster care during a child protection situation. And some of those are just families that have stepped up in Morrison County that said, I want to help kids and families. And some of those kids, those 60 kids that are in placement, might be placed in another county with another relative as well, like in Mille Lacs County or Todd County or Cass County, for example. Like Aunt Jane might live in Cass County, and then those kids in the child protection placement are with that aunt in Cass County.
But so then who tracks that number? Do we track that?
We
Because
track that number, and yep.
And so that number is related back to Morrison County.
Yes.
Not where that child then ends up.
That's right.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, Melanie, you have 19 staff that you manage to do this work, 20? What is it up to now? With the
It's
growing
18 or
number?
19.
Okay.
19.
Is it?
It's
Okay.
busy. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Very good report. And with that, adoption and as important as it is, I wonder if we could take just a moment and
Okay.
take a photograph with the resolution.
Okey-doke.
How about if it's ready?
Absolutely.
Unhook everything?
You gotta hold that in the picture, Mr. Chair.
I think that would be.
Do you want us to just stand behind you, or do you want to stand up somewhere, or?
We're gonna go right by the flag. We'll have the flag in the background.
All right.
Where are we going?
Right here.
Hey, Deb, you can stay back here.
Well, here, well,
Yeah,
Now, somebody's gotta hold a piece of paper.
those two.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All
Or do we have the chair?
I'm all right.
I'm good. I'm good.
Do we have the flag? Yeah. Okay.
Got all? Cheese. All right.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much.
Sorry, my terminology is confusing sometimes.
You understand completely.
All right.
Of course, always.
Okay, everybody should be rewired. And then we've got the social services report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, this next request for board action is not going to happen. We were at a meeting on Friday, and this is going to be postponed, and I'm going to bring something back to our planning meeting on Tuesday. So this particular interlocal agreement does not need to be discussed today, so.
Okay.
And then on the public health side, I have food, beverage, and lodging. Two licenses for one establishment, two different RBAs. The first is a new owner tobacco license for Urban Legend Tavern and Grill in Piers,
Actually Harding, but
or Hart.
I was
that's
gonna,
their address. Get that.
Okay.
Their address is Piers.
Yes.
Harding does not have
I
a
look
that's
for a
the one in
motion.
Harding. Yeah, I'll make a motion for that.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you. And then also, we would need a new owner establishment license for the same Urban Legend Tavern and Grill.
So
I'll make-
moved.
Second?
A motion and a second, discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have this morning,
Thanks,
Mr.
Brad.
Commissioner.
Excellent,
Brad.
thank you very
Have a
kindly.
good week.
Next item of business is land services, if Miss Amy, there she is.
Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Amy.
Here,
Johnny on the spot.
Who's she replacing? Another district two.
I'm Johnny on the spot.
Yours?
Good morning.
Cases.
Good morning, how are you today?
I am well, and you?
Wonderful, thank you very kindly.
All right. So this is actually, I'm bringing this on behalf of Commissioner Jelinski. Whenever.
Gentlemen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
One more time.
I'm bringing this up on behalf of Commissioner Jelinski. We had a resignation of his Board of Adjustment District 2 member. So we are looking to appoint Jeanette Eller-Watland to the Board of Adjustment to finish out Cody Smoody's term. And then after that, she would start her own term.
We look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second?
A motion and a second, further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes, thank you.
All right, thank you. And the next item I have is to consider the conditional use permit request for Kleiber Revocable Trust. This is to expand to a Tier 2 poultry slash feedlot, or poultry beef feedlot. This was considered by the Planning Commission and recommended for approval with 7 conditions. Those conditions are abide by local and state law, notify road authority when hauling manure during road restrictions, abide by the good neighbor, stormwater, and feedlot odor minimization plans, plan to maintain a 50-foot wide grass buffer around the perimeter of the barns after construction for ongoing stormwater management. On-site stockpiling of manure shall occur upon the stacking slab, and the feedlot owner shall notify receiving field owners of the unsuitability of soils for stockpiling. The feedlot owner shall notify the feedlot officer of manure cleanout, and upon completion of the second poultry barn, on-site manure storage and mortality disposal shall occur upon a permitted stacking slab or alternative method that meets the requirements of Minnesota Rule 7020. Until then, best management practices shall be observed for manure and mortality disposal.
I'll make a motion with the 7 conditions.
Second?
Further discussion?
Just one question, Amy.
Yes.
What's the difference between 5 upon a stacking slab and 7 upon a permitted stacking slab?
So this one was discussed because right now there is no stacking slab, and the soils are unsuitable for stockpiling. So what they were looking at is a concrete slab or utilizing the end of the apron of the barn for stacking until a permitted formal stacking slab. They are receiving funding for an engineered stacking slab, and so that was just differentiating between the two.
Amy, so the right soils can be a stacking slab?
No, it doesn't. A stacking slab is in lieu of piling on soil. So a stacking slab is an impervious surface. Generally, it's going to be concrete, and so we have a stacking slab, which is really a constructed facility rather than stockpiling on soils, because the soils here are not suitable for stockpiling.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Wouldn't 5 and 7 be redundant? Or not?
Well, the seventh one is talking about completion of the second barn, because right now they are stacking on the ground. We certainly can take 5 out, or we can take out on-site stockpiling manure shall occur upon the stacking slab, and just have 5 read, feedlot owner shall notify receiving field owners of the unsuitability of soils for stockpiling, and then 7 could stay the way it is. If that makes more sense to you, we certainly can do that.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, Amy, if you could clarify, again, this permit is for the new barn, and my question even back at the planning commission meeting was, why are we addressing the old barn? Shouldn't that be part of soil and water to address the old barn that's sitting there?
Well, we're looking at compliance with feedlot rules, which is the county's responsibility. And so when we're looking at a tier 2, we're looking at the whole operation at that point. And so we are looking at the existing barn and any deficiencies or anything that's not in compliance, along with this new barn, because they're looking for that tier 2, which includes both barns. So we can look at the management practices for both.
I think number 5, you know, we were at the planning meeting there, but number 5 is in there to refer to the fact that the identified receivers of the poultry waste had soils that were not allowable for them to stack on because of their soil type. So that 5 was in there just that these owners would notify those people that when they receive manure, that it's expected to be spread, not to be piled.
No, but I agree with Commissioner Lemire. We certainly can take out that first sentence. It is a bit redundant. We certainly can do that.
Would the motion reflect that then?
I'm okay, I could redo my motion and say, I'll make a motion with the 6 conditions, or 7 conditions with removing number 5 as a condition.
Do you want just the first sentence from number 5 removed? That would probably make sense.
Yes.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay.
So we have a motion, we have a second, further discussion. Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion
Okay.
passes.
I
Thank you.
will go ahead and redo that condition and bring it for signature. Thank you. That's all
Thanks,
I
Amy.
have.
Good,
Thanks,
thank you
Amy.
very, very kindly. Our next item deals with the auditor, and I don't believe the auditor is here today.
You get me
Oh,
instead.
here's the auditor. We're live.
We have the approval
we have a
for
meeting
3
tomorrow,
exempt
right?
permits. Mary of Lourdes School to hold a raffle on January 25th, 2019 at the Falls Ballroom. Morrison County Food Shelf to hold a raffle on April 27th at the Falls Ballroom. And St. Joseph's Church and Morrow to hold bingo on December 2nd, 2018, and a bingo with a raffle on March 3rd of 2019, both at the Parish Hall in Morrow.
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, further discussion. Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
And then, Mr. Chair, we have warrants. They were sent to you yesterday by Joyce. And a roll call vote for the warrants, the credit card bills, all of the expenses and whatnot that go with
I
that.
would look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, discussion,
To pay all the bills,
to
Mr.
pay
Chair.
all the bills? Everything, I'm to assume. Further discussion? Hearing none, it's a roll call vote. Commissioner Lemire?
Aye.
Wincher?
Aye.
Wilson?
Aye.
Bland?
Aye.
And myself is an aye vote. That motion passes. Thank you. Next item of business appears to be, and there he is, the county attorney. Good morning, Brian.
Brian?
So, members of the board, as you know, following a resignation in my office last week, we do have an attorney 2 position open. And at a prior board meeting, you authorized me to fill that position, which I'm in the process of doing right now. Today, as a follow-up, I'm asking for authority from the board to deviate from the midpoint hiring range if necessary. Now, whenever we have an attorney vacancy in our office, I never know what to expect in terms of applicants. Over the years, I've discovered that the economy and other factors can have a great impact on the number of applicants we receive for an open position. And this year, it appears that finding qualified applicants is more difficult than I anticipated. It's a challenging year for hiring. So I originally advertised for 2 weeks and received only 2 applicants that met the minimum qualifications for the position. So in response to that, I extended the position opening for another week, and fortunately, some more qualified applicants did submit their applications, and now we have several good applications, and in fact, several of them have considerable prosecution experience, so that's the good news. However, I do anticipate that the most experienced candidates for the position will understandably be seeking a salary that reflects their experience and skill set. And I anticipate that some of them will be seeking a salary beyond the midpoint for hiring. And I don't think that they would want to take a significant pay cut to come work here if we offered the job. So to be clear, I don't know who we'll be hiring yet. We have interviews set up at the end of the week. This is an important position. The person that we hire for this position will be prosecuting our most violent offenders, including homicide, sexual assault cases, aggravated robberies, burglaries, and felony assaults. It's important then that we hire the right person for this position, and I would like the maximum flexibility to offer this position to the right candidate. And so that's why today I'm here asking for permission, if necessary, to hire someone and offer a salary beyond the midpoint. Again, only if necessary.
I'd look for a motion.
So moved for more discussion.
Second.
Further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Brian, I have a question. Do you advertise the mid-range when you put this out there? And if not, if I'm an attorney looking for a job, I could probably just call in and they would tell me, what the range is, or am I wrong there?
The historical practice has been we advertise the entire range from top to bottom. And so I suppose a candidate submitting an application wouldn't know where the mid-range is.
But they could call in and somebody would tell them what the mid-range was, I'm assuming, correct?
But, Mr. Chair, and we don't, because we can deviate by asking the board, we don't limit ourselves with that. We typically list the entire range so people understand what the earning potential is for a position. Reasonable schools of thought could go either way, but I think what we've kind of looked at is it's most important that people understand the earning potential as a whole, and what that position would be capable of earning at this point in time. And then as far as the initial negotiation for where you start, that's going to be dependent upon the qualifications that they bring, the experience that they have, and then what we want to seek out, whether it complies with policy, or we come here today and ask you whether or not it makes sense given the circumstances to take a look at a little more flexibility given the candidate base and the time that we're looking at hiring.
Further discussion?
Wouldn't that kind of be for all positions, though, that we hire? You got a range, I don't know what the range is, but let's say 40 to 80. When you come in and apply for the job, it kind of depends on the experience you have that comes with that, whether you get the 80 or the 40, doesn't it?
Absolutely it does. Yep. The thing is we have an overall policy that limits that says that, in order to deviate from hiring up to midpoint, we need to ask the board. That's still a policy that exists, whether or not it's a policy that we want to look at, or, there's policies can always be changed, but the idea is that, that we hire and pay only what we need to pay. That differs drastically, number one, with positions, specific positions and the response that we get. I think we have leaders in the organization that very much take your lead and don't go beyond what's necessary to hire somebody at, but there are circumstances where that policy, that blanket policy, certainly constricts beyond what we may want it to constrict when it comes to trying to hire good people. So we've taken it as a case-by-case basis. It was something we didn't, I mean, hindsight's 2020. We probably should have thought of that in the initial request, knowing that it's hard to find that attorney to position, but we wanted to see what we got as applicants, and see where we were at with being able to draw an experience.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank
Okay,
you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Next item of business this morning is to hear from the sheriff, and way in the back of the room I see him, and here he comes. Good morning, Sheriff.
Morning, Mr. Chair.
Come on, Sheriff.
Sheriff. So that
What do you have for us today, Sheriff?
Little karaoke, I gotta get the speaker.
by doing this one.
Can we pick the song?
I'll leave that for you
Line
guys.
item for attorney. I
So
wanted to ask
today-
you, I want to get into.
Today, we're here to go over the annual contract regarding the Ramsey County Medical Center, who we contract with on an annual basis. So this will be January 1, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. So I'll have to get a signature from you, Mr. Chair, and the language hasn't changed. Everything's the same, except for we're just looking at a new year. So with that, I'll take any questions if there's questions.
Look for a motion.
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
second.
Further discussion?
Something we need.
Sheriff, can you go back in time just a little tiny bit? I realize that the medical examiner is out of the metro. Why would it be that we wouldn't have a medical examiner locally here in Morrison County?
So
Or do we have one?
We don't, no. Dr. Uyghur used to be our doctor on staff at the sheriff's office. He would sign all the death certificates. This is probably right around when Sheriff Wetzel took office, which was right around 2003. At that point, there would be a determination as to whether or not an autopsy needs to take place. If there was, we actually still worked through Ramsey County Medical Center at that time. I know last year there was some discussion as whether or not we reached out to other medical examiners to see where we were at in price. I just want to let you guys know we did that. So the research we did is with Ramsey County, we just kind of looked at our surrounding counties. We got Morrison, Crow, and Cass County. We all use the Ramsey County Medical Center in St. Paul. Todd County, Benton County, Mille Lacs County, they use Midwest. So we did some price comparisons. We average right around $58,000 a year with Ramsey County Medical Center. Midwest Medical Examiner's Office, they charge per capita, and it's a $2.50 rate. So with 34,196 being the population for Morrison County, we'd be looking at $85,490 a year. So there is a significant amount of savings that we do have to our county. And just wanted to point that out as we're renewing this, that we did a little research and we're sitting pretty good and we're happy with the services that we're getting.
I'm anticipating, based on what you just said with other counties also have hospitals and doctors and staff, and they obviously also are choosing, this isn't something local anymore, we need to farm this business out.
Correct, yep.
Mr. Chair, so Sean, when counties enter an agreement like this for outside services with the medical examiner, we do not, we no longer then have a county coroner, is that correct?
We're actually trained as deputies to be the county coroner. So years ago, what would happen is we would have to contact a coroner. They would come out to the scene. They would communicate with Dr. Weger. Dr. Weger would then make the final call whether or not an autopsy would need to be made. Dr. McGee from Ramsey County Medical Center actually comes out to our agency, trains everybody, and then what we do is we simply get on the phone at every unexpected death scene, and we'll communicate with the Ramsey County Medical Center 24/7. They always have someone, obviously, that's licensed and certified answering the phone. We'll explain the scene in detail. They'll ask if there's a past history of medical conditions. They'll ask what kind of scene is it? Is it a suicide? Is it a fatality? What are we dealing with? And sometimes they'll even ask for photographs of the scene before they make a determination of whether or not that body is going to be released to a local funeral home or whether or not an autopsy is going to be required.
So in years past, under the log of county officials within a county, there would be listed a county coroner.
Correct.
We no longer list that.
Correct.
Okay.
It's us as deputies actually going out there with the training that we have from Dr. McGee, basically relaying all that information of the scene to the medical examiner's office, and then they're making the call, whether or not the body's going to be released to the funeral home or an autopsy is going to be required.
Thank you.
Yep.
Further discussion? Gentlemen, we have a motion, we have a second. Hearing no further discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Sheriff, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
That's all you have for us today?
Yes, till 1 o'clock, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Next item of business is to hear from Public Works. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Steve.
Just one action item for your consideration today. Good morning. We have a request from the city of Royalton, based on requests from residents in that area, to have a traffic study and speed zone investigation conducted on Arkansas 54, kind of our infamous 54 down there. Runs from US Highway 10 to our County State Aid Highway 26. It is, the south part of it is in Benton County, right by Bill Superette, and then ties in right up by the high school to our County State Aid Highway. We've had 2 speed zones done, one in 2006 where the currently established zones were put in place, where coming off Highway 10 you have a 40-mile-an-hour zone as you head north, to about a couple hundred feet from their 2nd Street, then it converts to a 35-mile-an-hour zone with a 20-mile when children are present at the school, which goes up to Highway 26. The last time this was conducted was in 2016. There was activity going on in that the high school was being expanded and remodeled. And also Bill Superette was coming in. That development was taking place at the time that zone was, that study took place. I think the residents feel that it wasn't included appropriately when they did the last study, and that's why they now are again wanting MnDOT to look at this. Speed zones are established by the state in a situation like this. It isn't qualifying currently for us to establish the zone ourselves. And so what it takes is the board to adopt this resolution, make a request. The traffic engineer from MnDOT does the study and the investigation and determines what the legal zone should be through this area. And so our recommendation is that that the board should adopt this. I think it would be appropriate and kind of put this to rest if it isn't changed for, I think, a while, unless there's some other substantial development that takes place.
Thank you, Steve. I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Steve, what would we hope to gain from this? Would we hope to gain from Highway 10 or 26, whichever direction, to have this a 30-mile-an-hour zone? I'm just asking.
That would be probably the best that could come out of this, that the 35 would be dropped to 30. You'd maintain the 20 mile an hour when children are present. That would stay in place there. But the normal zone, when activities weren't taking place, dropping from 35 to 30 through the area that the school is. It could be that the 40 mile an hour would be dropped also because of Bill Superette and the access is taking place in that area. There is a fairly large residential area right along the Benton-Morrison County line on the east side of the road too. So, but it's not going to go any lower than 30 miles an hour.
Who determines the speed limit by the school when children are present?
Who determines it?
Yeah, is that the
I
state
mean, that
also?
question's been kicked around here. I think that, I mean, they've established it, and that's a part of what this is about. But the enforcement of it, I guess, becomes an issue that is a little bit harder to answer. And I think that, I don't know if we ever did get an answer on what it means. Do you want to share that?
Sure. And again, I guess we have our sheriff here, and he was so kind to answer that question. Maybe you could give I don't know if you still have the answer for that, Sheriff, at all, if you'd like to speak on that. But again, the challenge, I've had numerous phone calls on this. There's a few things that are going on with this. Number one, there's a speed radar coming from the south end by Highway 10 to 26. It's set at 20 miles an hour, and yet the speed limit is 35, and so it flashes until you get down to 20, but then what they're saying, well, when children are present. And I says, well, what's the definition of children are present? And Sean got an explanation for me. Another point is from where 26 leaves the city of Royalton, it goes out maybe a half a mile or something like that, and it still says 30, and there's very few residents around there. So most of them they wanted the explanation of the 20 mile an hour, and yet they also wanted that reduced from 35 to 30. But again, my point was also, you have to enforce that. And I was brought up by somebody too that, well, why don't we have the sheriff's department out there since it's a county road? And I go, well, we have a city police there. So there's there's a lot of things going into play with this road. So, and I'll let Sheriff Larson explain the 20 mile an hour.
So we looked it up by the statute, speed zoning in a school zone, and it clarifies saying the establishment of the school speed limit on any trunk highway shall be with the consent of the Commissioner of Transportation. Such speed limit shall be in effect when children are present, because I think there was a question whether or not this could be enforced, even if children were not present, just because it's posted the speed zone. So it says when children were present or going to or leaving school during opening or closing hours of school and or recess periods. So in other words, basically it's people are commuting to school during the day, they're leaving school and or when children are present. So if there's no one, if it's noon and there's no children out there that are present, this is something that cannot be enforced per the statute.
And another question was, what happens if there's some activities going on? That was another question too, like a football game where you can see the kids from the road, so there's a lot of things there, but my interpretation is when they're leaving or coming from school, and that's what you read there.
Yes, Commissioner, and that's what it clarifies in the statute. So outside of that, any case has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and it's in black and white right there, so.
Thank you.
Just having law enforcement visible, I think, during those extra activities is going to help slow down traffic. No questions about it.
Further discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion, a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Sheriff, thank you.
Thank you.
Good grief, Ms. Gruber, we are up to you again.
All right.
Administrators report.
The only action item that I have today is something we've talked about a number of times, both in budget and in planning sessions. We have an interim plan in place currently for our IT director position. Amy Middendorf has been serving in that role, has been doing a very good job with that role. And so the proposal is to appoint her as the IT director and to fill then that vacant system that she would have left as system administrator position. And this is one similar to what we just spoke about with the county attorney's office, that it's a tough recruit. IT positions this day and age are difficult to fill. There are many opportunities out there in this field, I should say. And so we don't know exactly what we're going to get, but we would like some flexibility with that and hire, and have the ability, if necessary, to hire for that range, given the anticipated difficulty to fill that. If it's not necessary, it's not necessary, but if it's necessary, we're at least able to then respond accordingly for that right candidate that fits Morrison County.
I'd look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, and further discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Again, Deb, could you clarify who Amy Middendorf is? Again, is this somebody that applied for the position, or is she currently employed?
She's blonde. She works. No, she currently was in the department. Has been for a number of years. I think she's worked in IT probably about 10 years now. She worked in our jail prior to that. She was the system administrator, so she worked with the network. I don't know what else you need for clarification, but she's been serving as the interim. She's put in place a nice plan. I've worked with her. We're going to work together to hire this position. I've worked with a lot of different departments at some point in time to work on hiring, so I'm anxious to sit with her and work on that, through that process. She's been very good at stepping into a difficult time with the remodel that we have, with all of the change in staff. It's been challenging, maybe is the best word for IT, and she's done a good job and proven that. I've consulted with other areas in the organization, made sure other leaders are comfortable with what she's brought to the table in the last number of months, and consensus is that I think we have the right person here, and I'm anxious to move forward and working with her.
And just so we're clear, this is a big motion. We're appointing someone as the director. We're asking to fill the vacant system administrator position, and we're asking to deviate from the hiring range. There's 3 items here. Further discussion.
Deb, question, we're deviating a lot from normal. Do we need to change our policy a little bit, or is that sufficient? I mean,
That's a good question. And we've talked about that as a leadership group a number of times. We've talked about the filling vacancies when somebody leaves and whether we can backfill without board approval. It's been the direction from this board that you'd like to see those positions come to you. So I guess I assumed you'd also like to see when we're hiring, potentially hiring. Again, this is just a if necessary. This isn't a given that we'll hire beyond that. So yes, when we see something continuously come before the board and the questions asked over and over again, that's a reasonable approach to say maybe we need to adjust the policy. But we've addressed portions of the policy before, and you've indicated you want to see those. So more than willing to bring them to you. And I guess that's kind of the direction I was taking, that we should probably let you know where we're at with hiring. I think it also helps to illustrate the market we're in, which it's tougher than it ever has been to find quality employees and attract those. And so that's driving a lot of this. I shouldn't say typical, but a clerical position that's being hired, we're still getting a good quality, or a good number of candidates, quality candidates. But some of these more specialized positions, it's harder and harder to find. So we're coming in to fill vacancies anyway, and you've said you want to see that. This is one of those that we add to positions that we think is going to just be a little more difficult. Sometimes we know that for sure, and sometimes we don't until we get the applications in.
Sounds good, thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, this is something that just hasn't been brought to us. We discussed this at a planning session a couple times already.
Further discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
I don't have other action items for you. Of course, today's a big day in the election. Those that are filing for office or have filed and are running, good luck to you. We clearly are an organization that is impacted greatly by elections. And so we'll move forward and anxious to see results and work with whomever it is that wins. And so, big day. As a reminder, all of that information is reported through our website, and we'll post on Facebook and remind everybody where the links are to see results as they come in tonight. But lots of folks out there working very hard to help administer elections, and that's much appreciated throughout the county and state to do so.
Good information. Thank you very kindly. Unless there's something else, the next item of business that we have is...
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Excuse me, yes.
Since Deb's still up here, and I missed this when Brian left the podium, our county attorney, but when we look at his request to deviate beyond midpoint, and we're in the middle of budget process, how does that impact, or does it impact at all, his budget request for his department?
Good question. The current incumbent that left office, or the person who vacated, was at the top of the scale, so that's what was budgeted for. It can happen that that's not the case, and that would impact a budget, but as you recall, a budget is a budget, and we still want to hire the correct people. So it's understanding the impacts and talking about those impacts and whether it's necessary to make those decisions to be able to get a quality candidate in place. But in his instance, in this situation, we budgeted for top of the scale because of the person who was in the position who held it. But you're right, it could impact budget numbers, and we need to be sure we're making those decisions accordingly, but we also need to be able to fill some of these positions. So it's weighing those on what is necessary to fill and what budget numbers are and what we need to be able to move forward.
And from our perspective here too, as we're tasked with approving a budget to go forward for county staff, the timing of this is more critical because we've already passed a preliminary levy, and then if there are things that push our preliminary budget numbers outside of where we were willing to go, how do we answer that? How do we find those funds? Because I think, not necessarily speaking for the rest of the board, but I'll speak for the rest of the board and say, we do want to hire the best possible people, and we are proud that we do that, and that we've done that in the past, and that we've got good employees out there. But we also have to be respectful of the fact that we have to figure out how we're going to make all the numbers line up at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and budgets are just that. And then we also have when somebody leaves a position, which happens throughout the year. People are coming and going, and there are vacancies there are time periods that we don't have staff when there are vacancies, and so that often can offset differences if there are differences, but that's exactly what a budget is. It's a target number, and it's our job to make sure that we're falling within those targets, and if we don't, we better have a darn good explanation for it.
Thank you for your clarification.
I would have a real hard time if the county attorney was to come back and say to this board, trying to find what I'm looking for here, and say to this board that he hired somebody and paid them over the top end of a position. Currently today, if I understood you correctly, he had budgeted the top end for that county attorney that left. And what we authorized was to deviate from the midpoint hiring range. We did not authorize to go over the top end of the pay grade. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever done that.
I don't
That's not
either.
even the question.
That's
so,
exactly
yep.
right, but nonetheless, to chime off of Commissioner Bland's statement, I understand the mid-range, but we wouldn't go to the high range and go over that. That's not part of this.
I don't know of
motion.
anybody who's gotten.
And I don't know that that's
the
part
right-
of the statement at all.
No, I wasn't,
what you're saying.
Mr. Chair, I wasn't concerned that that an offer would be made to a candidate out there that would go outside that range. My concern was the timing of filling a vacancy like this, and with the attorney's budget having already been presented to this board and had the consideration by the members of this board that because of this vacancy and the timing of it, if that would have an effect on the budget presentation that his department gave to us.
Very good.
But I certainly not concerned that the department would spend money outside of that bounds.
Very good. Anything further? If there is nothing further, our next item of business should be committee reports, calendars, and such. Gentlemen, I would look for the dates to be between November 11th through the 24th. And today we'll start with Commissioner Wincher.
All right, you have to forgive me here, my calendar goes from October to December, back to November, so let's do
We just
October.
considered between November 11th and the 24th.
All right. We have a director meeting, we have a planning session at 8:30 on the 13th. And there's also that potluck for social services at 11:30 to 1 on the 13th. And we have budget at 1 o'clock on the 13th. And I believe we have a ditch meeting at 6:30 at the City Hall in Little Falls at 6:30.
And our budget meeting is at the Historic Courthouse?
Is that right, Mr. Chair?
I believe it is.
The
Yep.
budget?
Listening to you.
No, you're not.
You don't have to listen.
The chair,
Tabitha knows where we are,
so we
just
know.
double
No, that's a
checking.
good, so that's gonna be at the courthouse. the
That's
old-
at the Historic
The
Courthouse.
old courthouse, okay? On the fourth,
We could change the IT training room.
but at this
We
point,
could change to the IT training
Either way,
room.
it'll be.
or we could put it here, we could bring it here. So let us know, Tabitha. So there's gonna be a ditch meeting somewhere.
That's at City Hall.
That's okay, excuse me, a budget somewhere.
Okay.
Department head on Wednesday the 14th. On the 15th, there's a TCC meeting at 5 o'clock. Boy, I'm gonna have a hard time. So when does it go, till the 20th? I have a
24th.
I have a board, Great River Regional Finance in St. Cloud at 5 PM on the 20th. And let's see, there's a truth and, no, that's.
We have county
yeah.
board also on the 20th.
I'm gonna find- Oh, yeah, there it's written, yeah, county board on the 20th, and you guys will have to help me out, I have to go through my notes, but that's what I got for now.
Okay. Commissioner Lemire.
He's got me.
Okay. Commissioner Wilson.
I've got, first of all, on the 14th, MTWC, our insurance board, is canceled. The 15th, I've got airport at noon. And on the 20th, community development at 12:15. And the 23rd, Mississippi Headwaters, but they're looking at possibly changing that date. So it could go ahead or behind.
What was canceled on the 14th?
MTWC. the
In
insu-
Staples?
Yep,
So
in
you're
Staples,
gonna
that's
take
canceled, yep. Not enough business to go over.
Commissioner Blaine.
I think I am complete here.
Okay. And myself, on the 13th, 8 o'clock in the morning, I've got to stop at the food shelf with the NWTF. It's Turkey Day, where we'll be delivering turkeys there. It's also the annual meeting for the Egg Society at 7:30 that evening, which I will not be attending due to the ditch meeting. On the 15th, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I've got an Armor Owners and Operators meeting in Douglas County. On the 17th, as a matter of information, there's a Sprout is open at 10 o'clock in the morning. And at 7 o'clock, I'm anticipating the rest of the board has been invited to a 4-H Programs Award
Oh, that's right.
at 7 o'clock in the evening on the 17th at the VFW. at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 19th. I'm not exactly positive what this is yet, but I have a PER meeting, deals with elections at the Government Center. On the 21st at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I've got a Hands of Hope meeting at Pine Country Bank. On the 22nd, which is Thanksgiving, the SECB has been canceled. And that is all for me that I'm aware of.
Where's that 4-H rewards program?
The VFW.
At what, 7 o'clock?
Forgot where that was again. I think 7 o'clock, yeah. At 7 o'clock. It's a 4-H Programs Award, VFW in Little Falls.
Thank you.
Is there anything further that should come before this board? I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? This meeting is adjourned. It's 10:11.